Tell me if you've had this experience at Epiphany. You finish up at a service, the 11 o'clock for me, usually, and you're walking out, and you see Doit looking at you with a look in his eye, and you think, ooh, and so you duck away, and you beat feet across the skyway, and all of a sudden he comes right up behind you, grabs you by the elbow, makes you speed walk through the Great Hall, down the stairs, outside into the courtyard, across the courtyard, into Christie House, into his office, and says, I need something, and you're the perfect person to do it. We need an Epiphany Lazarus icon, and you are the perfect person to do it. And I said, I disagree. I said, I think you are mistaken. It didn't go anywhere. All of this, and to be fair to Doit, why he might actually think this, is that he had just concluded with a number of us in this room an Epiphany Minion over the summer, taught by Doit and by Ben Logan, the brilliant Ben Logan, and many of you, I'm sure, have seen his presentations. And I had asked Ben, and then went back to him again after Doit gave me this commission, what do I need to read? Ben, he just knew. And this is a curated collection of some of the books that he gave me. I said, are there any thin ones? But no, well, a couple. But the list that Ben put together, the bibliography, is also on the epiphanyseattle.org website. So you can find Ben's presentations, you can find Doit's original presentation that kicked all of this off a few years ago, and you can find the bibliography. So next year you can do this. When Doit commissions a statue of Lazarus. I don't want to give you any ideas. Sorry, oh shoot. Here's the thing, we don't worship saints, but we do venerate them. And Doit just gave us a really good set of examples of why we do. And perhaps it's because their lives and choices seem much more approachable and relatable than Jesus as God. Life and choices. But Lazarus, by any account, is something else again, and that's what I thought when Doit first asked me to do this. It was pretty intimidating. But by the time I got home, I was already starting to draw it in my head. And a couple of months in, I thought, what made Doit think I could do this? I mean, it's just, there's so much, and how do you even decide, and what's the concept, and why does it even matter if Lazarus is the beloved disciple? And all this stuff is banging around in my head. And by the end of it, of course, all I could think and all I can say now is thank you. I won't say more about that. So I began with another read of the Gospel of John, and Doit and Kate have asked me just to talk about my process here and the things that popped up as I was trying to come up with this design. And it wasn't just me. I mean, I dragooned Ben back in, and Doit and friends, some of whom are in this room, as I was thinking it through. What I want to talk about today is two things that I was looking at simultaneously. One was, why does it matter? If Lazarus was the beloved disciple, what are the implications of that for us? And conceptually, how do I capture that into an image? I pretty quickly had to set aside the notion of an icon because I wasn't really even sure what that was. But I wanted a pendant. I wanted something that I could touch and would remind me so that I could get it in one, what I came to think was the central message of the Lazarus story. So I zeroed in on that pretty quickly. But thinking about, why does it matter? And also, how have other artists through time tackled this? What is it about the story that they have chosen to highlight? What is the frame that they've chosen. And I talked to a lot of friends and asked them, what do you remember about the Lazarus story? What speaks to you? What's the first thing that pops into your head? And a couple of them said, Jesus wept, right? I mean, that's their way in to the story, and that story of relationship, and I'm there with you, and belovedness. For another, it was Martha's boldness, right? That implied closeness to Jesus. I mean, can you imagine chastising the Christ, right? If you were here, the one whom you loved would not have died. But for me, it was always from the beginning and all the way through the command and the response, the relational aspect of that, but also a hint into Jesus's mission, divine mission, and ours. So maybe we could just start by taking a look at some of the images that I came across. I just thought they were really fascinating. And if someone could hit the lights in the back, that'd be great. Thank you, Amanda. So this is wholly unusual. This is Lazarus solo before anybody comes near him. He's in the tomb. The head is turned maybe to hear. Maybe he hears the voice, or maybe it's just how the body has settled in death. It's massive. It was done by Jacob Epstein. It's in University of Oxford. And it's so extraordinary. I mean, when I first saw it, I thought, holy moly. Just the emotional content of that, strong, life just held in and perhaps in abeyance. This one, Kate is going to talk about in a few moments, Donald Jackson's illustration for the St. John's Bible. It's wholly unique among all of the images that I looked at in terms of the perspective, with the commanding figure in the foreground and looking down into the well of light. And it may be fanciful on my part, but the brush strokes, the paint strokes, it almost looks like he's looking into a geode, and he's opened it up and there's life inside. And again, this, pictures Lazarus still in the tomb. I quite like this one. A lot of, from the beginning, many of the depictions present Lazarus at the moment he emerges from the tomb, often as if he were just waiting behind the door, ready to go. Which, is no mean feat. And notice, too, I started paying attention to the use of stone and rock. As I started looking at these, it came up again and again, life from rock in some way, which I was not expecting. This one there's just enormous energy, and you begin to get a sense of the crowd that was there and their response to what was happening. Those who loved Lazarus and those who were merely alarmed by this show of supernatural power. And a detail I did not see. I didn't see this one. I saw it, but I didn't notice this detail until after the final design. Doit and I had gone through the final design of the pendant. You'll notice that Lazarus, again, ready to go, and the rock is just a solid rock, but he has his arms crossed, as if coming forward for a blessing. Love that. Here's another one with Lazarus. He's just like leaning against the door jamb, right? And I like this one. The door is removed by one man, while another man covers his nose, right? He's been dead. The sister who's pointing, I believe, is Martha, saying, "Don't do it. It's going to smell. It's terrible. What are you doing?" And Mary is prostrate at his feet. And Jesus is beckoning, right? It's a very, very gentle, somewhat compassionate gesture, offering Lazarus a hand. And from this point forward, in all these illustrations, you get this big crowd, which is super interesting. Here again, this time, when one of the interesting things about Jesus's command, after he says, Lazarus, come forth, he commands the community to help. Remove the stone and unbind him. So from the beginning, the beloved community is involved in this process. And here you can see the door. You've got 3 people, right, with their hands on that door. And Mary and Martha in their familiar positions. Jesus again extending his hand. Lazarus's face is unbound. And his expression, and it may just be the manner of the painter, but his expression, he looks a little wary, if not skeptical, like, really? You can only imagine. The faces in the crowd are mixed. None of them looks very happy about this, and perhaps each is considering as affects their own interests. This is Del Piombo, and it is the act of the unbinding. So he's out, and the unbinding begins, again with the help of the community. Lazarus is looking pretty robust in this depiction. And again, there is an array of responses. Very large-scale background, quite grand, magisterial. And while Lazarus is clearly the larger and more physically powerful of the two, it is Jesus who is above, pointing down, and Lazarus looking up. It's quite stunning. I mean, wouldn't you love to see some of these in real life? This one, I wish you could see better. Let's add a new projector to the list of things we want to do here. In this version, and it's unusual, Lazarus is barely alive and in great physical distress and being hauled up and out by his friends. There's a terrible energy in this dance, the straining to pull his bindings from him, Jesus pointing to a dramatic sky, the crowd in disarray, some prostrate before Jesus, some straining to reach Lazarus. And the setting is very strange. I talked to Jad about this, and he said it's as if it were taking place in the ruins of a temple. It's outside of time and place, just kind of a royal. Now here we have, and this is titled Jesus Wept, right? So here the implied promise, I did not and will not abandon you. I am always here, I've got you, and maybe even well done. This is a little more fanciful version, but there are lots of these about, even short of being the beloved disciple, Lazarus is called the great friend, right? And here you have both of them haloed, though Jesus is larger and has a cross, both robed, though Lazarus's robe is made up of burial wrappings, which are coming undone in the embrace of Jesus. And I just love the rocks. I mean, the rocks are so good. This is the place that is venerated to this day, known as Lazarus's tomb. And one of the things super interesting about this, you notice that in order to come out, you have to come up. And I love that black depth behind. It's a photograph, obviously, but I used a lot of this for the initial drawings. So, as I said, what spoke most to me looking at all of these was the come forth call and response. That still to me was the part of the story. But it left me with some questions. Who exactly is Jesus calling forward, and to what end? I think you need to answer those questions before you can really decide on the concept that you're, going to put forward. And I think we can answer that in part by looking at the consequences. I mean, 3 things seem particularly true from all of this. 1, shock and awe. Jesus demonstrates the power of his reach, that no one, not even the one he loved, is spared or overlooked. He does so knowing his own life is in danger. His disciples said, don't go. They'll just kill you. Don't go there. He does it in front of the family, friend, church leaders, spies, agitators, unbelievers, and influencers of the day who are gathered at his tomb. He's risking everything to call our attention to this story. We know Jesus teaches by parables. His miracles are also parables. What is it about this story we need to understand? Oops, not yet. With Lazarus' return, and Joyce spoke to this, for all time, we now have an eyewitness to the cosmic Christ. Someone capable of writing or perhaps dictating the introduction to the Gospel of John. So different in subject and language than anything in the other three Gospels. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's like, whoa, what happened to this story? This is, a big spotlight. And in what has to be, I think, the greatest altar call of all time, we are given an encapsulation of the divine mystery, Jesus' mission, and perhaps our own. Lazarus answers the call. We may have here a glimpse of the driving purpose of Jesus' mission, to call each of us out and forth and into awareness of our being as incarnational souls, a kind of upwelling of the indwelling, into full expression as members of the body of the cosmic Christ, each an embodiment of Christ consciousness. This is no small feat for Jesus or for us, and it's an ancient notion and a contemporary one, the idea of having to die in order to be reborn. The death is the death of the ego or the small self, often called the false self, that grab bag of habit, conditioning, prejudices, trauma responses, relationship styles, to use some contemporary terms, that we can mistake for a true I. And as piggly wiggly, shape-shiftingly elusive as that I can be, we nevertheless experience its exposure with terror. If I am not I, who am I? And without a good teacher, don't try this at home, children. Without a good teacher, guide, scripture, practices, community, the death of that I can be, and maybe is in any event, a terrible experience. But it's also a critical one. We experience it as a kind of hollowing out, the desolation of the abandoned that accompanies great grief, but may be necessary so that mercy can be received, so that we can feel that shock to the lungs of new air, the breath of God filling us with new life. It is grace received, not my will, but God's will, not my love, but God's love. It changes our body because it changes our mind. And it's interesting to me that even though this has now become central to contemporary approaches to psychiatric therapy, right? That first distancing from emotions and feelings and thoughts, realizing that you are not those, right? It's a super interesting and important step that leads to wisdom. But it doesn't necessarily lead to love. Jesus calls on Lazarus not to grow up. I mean, imagine the story, Lazarus, grow up. Something Deutsch would say, and has done. Pastoral care. He's not even calling him to wake up, right? Both of which are essential to full living, and as I said, stations on the way to wisdom. And certainly the Buddha's exhortation, wake up, right? Jesus calls upon Lazarus to come out, come forth, The implication being that what he is calling can hear him, and thus is already awake, though the body is dead. Right? So he must have known, Jesus, that Lazarus could literally rise to the occasion. Like calls to like, love to love, right? That's what's happening here. So why does this matter? Deutsch talked about, the lessons that we take from how Lazarus lived, post being brought back. I think it matters too, what if, I found myself asking, what if my first exposure to what it meant to be a Christian was through this story, right? A story of love calling love, a story of how we're meant to live, honoring our inner divinity by how we live in the world, living as full expressions of God's creation. I mean, that kind of makes you want to sit up a little straighter, right? And why? Why are we called to do that? To keep it going, to keep creation going and perhaps evolving, and by loving God, ourselves, others, to become co-creators of God's kingdom of love. And we are so fortunate to attend a church and be part of a community where this is so. And don't get me wrong, I don't think we can avoid the cross to get to new life. Certainly not as long as we collectively remain turned away from the way of love. Everyone suffers. Everyone goes through the dark night before the dawn. Nevertheless, we can lessen pain and suffering for ourselves and others if we know enough to take the call, the kingdom of priests, to serve our God and spread a little true joy. And how? Lazarus hears and he answers. One suspects he has been preparing himself for this. But the call comes first. John 15:16, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you that you should go forth and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain. Peter 1:23 tells us that the seed of immortality has already been planted within us. St. Paul tells us faith is a grace, and in one of the great understatements of all time, his grace to me was not without effect. Thomas Merton says, you knew there'd be a Merton, right? To believe is to consent to a creative command that raises us from the dead. Ilia Delio, who Deutsch introduced me to, is a 21st century theologian and Franciscan sister. She says, there is already an other inside of me that is part of the larger whole. I am in relationship to it. In this way, we are agents in the evolution, the continuous ongoing rebirthing of creation. If we love as we are made to do, those whom we love will also love themselves and others. Rinse and repeat. If we love, love lives. I just want to say a word about the cosmic Christ. As Deutsch said, we tend to think largely in anthropomorphic and gendered terms of God rather than cosmic terms. And that was, for the most part, the language of those who wrote the Bible. And it does speak to the personal relational mystery of our being. But it also makes it easy to miss out on understanding divinity as the absolute mystery at the heart of cosmic life, which includes our life. God is not something we grasp, says Delio. God is something that grasps us. And again, this one, God is not the creator from the past that just set everything in motion, but the realm of infinite possibility calling us into new life. Those are cosmic terms. See, says Paul, everything is made new. You might have thought Paul was old news, but Paul was an astronaut, right? And so was Lazarus. And maybe, the Lazarus story suggests that you and I are as well. Again, the very good news is that the infinite, the cosmic, was made incarnate so that we may enter into relationship with it. And it's in us, right? The call is coming from inside the house. We do not travel alone, but with the promise, as Julian of Norwich says, all is well and all will be well. We are an intentional part of the whole. Teresa of Avila said, God himself is on the journey. And that makes it a little easier to say yes to the call. Okay, so here's, I think I said, thinking about all of this, right? I mean, what do you do? And luckily, I don't have to give a sermon every Sunday, and I don't have to, I had 6 months to think about this. So I made a whole bunch of drawings. I knew I wanted a wearable piece. And Dwight had a pendant that had gotten broken or something like that, and I wanted to give that to him too. I knew I was going to need it more than he did, but something that I could touch in the middle of a contentious conversation or a really tough situation, with or without others present, to remind myself of who I am and who I'm talking to bring my best self forward, to come forth, my best self, to meet the moment and a fellow child of God in love. And I wanted, so visually, I wanted the moment of emergence, right? So the elements of the tomb are there with the dark background, the rocks around. The face is blank to reflect light, fancifully perhaps to see your own reflection, if anyone gets that close. And the arms are crossed for a blessing. The head and torso are raised, almost like a cameo, right? So that when you touch it, you can feel that elevation, that act of coming forward. I made a dozen sketches in this vein, some of them quite dumb. One looked like Mr. T, sort of, like big old medallion. There was one that looked like Ghostbusters, coming out of the tomb. Like, no. But we selected one, and I took it to a friend, Erica Nelson Sheehan, who has a small shop, a fine jewelry shop up on 34th called Hitchcock. And she helped me decide on materials. I was going to go enamel, but we decided we wanted something heftier and more natural. We went with silver or bronze. But she helped with size and proportion, and how do you actually make a thing like this? How do you translate a drawing into a three-dimensional pendant that's comfortable to wear, but also beautiful and fine? And she pulled in a wax caster, and we did the wax cast, and I brought it to Dwight, and we tweaked a little, and as one does. So solid silver or bronze, hand cast, hand finished by local artisans, available directly from Hitchcock, and just email her. Her email address is on our Epiphany website if you're interested. And subsequently, I reached out, there you go, to another friend. Some of you know Carice Cady, who was the design director at Pyramid. She's an artist as well. And I gave her the pendant, and I said, can you draw this? I mean, you give us a real drawing that we could use? And all the design files. So if we wanted to build some kind of ongoing Epiphany program here, or create icons, or T-shirts are coming, right? We'd have it. And then I said, what's this gonna run me, right? And she's like, I would just like a pendant, right? So, and did I tell you that she was the one who designed the St. John's Bible illustrations for use on the Epiphany website? So she knows us, and, she's quite extraordinary. I just want to put just a final plug in for this kind of study, and a final thank you, Dwight. The Bible is a palimpsest and perhaps a kind of pentimento, where old stories that were erased come forward and come up. They rise up, sort of like Lazarus, bleed up into the new. And there are hints and ghosts and mysteries that repeat and amplify over the centuries. Attention to them and all those quirky, strange little details, go right to them, because they will sometimes, often, deepen your immersion in the mystery. So I'm really grateful for having the opportunity. I'm really sorry I gave you such a hard time, Dwight, but you started it. You set the tone. Anyway, thank you all for being here. We're so lucky to have this beautiful community to support us all as we go. Appreciate it.